Mr. President, I appreciate this opportunity to speak on the floor tonight. People watching at home, to the extent there is anyone watching at home tonight, but those who have gathered here are still in the gallery watching the Senate. The Senate is debating the budget. It's a massive budget, the largest in the world in terms of any entity for that. I was about to say any government, but of any entity on the planet. And as of right now, if that budget is not passed, I believe by tomorrow night, the federal government does not have authority to keep operating beyond the bare minimum. And so that's what the debate is about that you're watching. And we'll see what's going to happen here over the next few hours in terms of ultimately getting a vote and what the leaders of the respective parties have agreed on. But what I wanted to talk tonight is related to the budget, but goes much deeper than that, and that is the state of America and the state of our economy. Last night I had the opportunity to come here and speak a little bit about foreign relations and international situation that we were facing, but I wanted to speak for a moment because that's what the budget is about our domestic affairs. And I think the budget is a reflection of that, and you've heard a lot of different speeches here tonight to the extent you're watching about different things that are happening in our country. The senator from Alabama spoke a moment ago about immigration, but in talking about immigration, he talked about the constraints that are upon the middle class. Before that, we've seen others speak about issues. So it all, at the end of the day, as we talk about the budget, increasingly the debate is through the lens of those factors that people are facing in their daily lives throughout this country. I always tell the story of my parents because for me, it's what's given framework to my vision of this country. My parents were very poor, and they grew up in another country. My father lost his mother when he was 9 years old, and he had to go to work literally the next day. He would work for the next 70 years in Cuba, in Havana. My mother was one of 7 girls who remembers that she never went hungry, but she's pretty sure her parents did, so that their children would have enough to eat. She was raised by her father. My grandfather was disabled as a young man. He had polio and struggled his whole life to provide for his girls. They came to America in 1956 in search of a better life. They came here with nothing more than the dreams of that better life and the hope of a better life. They didn't know anyone. They barely had any money. They barely had any formal education, and they arrived in this country in 1956. And they never made a lot of money here. My father ended up settling into a job as a bartender at a hotel primarily. My mother was a cashier. She was a stock clerk at Kmart. She worked as a maid at a casino in Las Vegas. My parents never became rich, but my parents achieved the American dream. Because the American dream is never about how much money you make. The American dream has always been about achieving happiness as you define it. And while they weren't rich, my parents were able to afford to own a home in a safe neighborhood, a neighborhood safe enough that they would allow us, me and my sister, to walk to school when we lived in Las Vegas. My parents were able to retire with dignity. And my parents, just a generation removed from poverty and a lack of any formal education, lived to see all 4 of their children go to college and have a life much better than their own. They fully lived the American dream. It's the American dream that's been possible because this nation was founded on a powerful idea that all people are created equal and that all people deserve an equal opportunity to achieve happiness as they define it. That American dream isn't just a talking point. It defines us as a nation and as a people. It makes us different and special and, in my opinion, better than any other nation that's ever existed. But today, what's something that troubles us is that American dream seems to be eroding in the minds of way too many people, and we understand why. There are people that they open up the newspaper every day and they read, like today's a perfect example, the Dow Jones closed over 300 points. Wall Street is setting record profits. They keep reading about how the economy's rebounding and unemployment is down, but they don't feel any of this. They are working as hard as they ever have, but their paychecks haven't gone up in more than a decade. Meanwhile, everything in their life costs more. So you think about that. You are working hard. You're making less than ever relative to how much things cost. And you are frustrated to read that all these other people seem to be doing so great, and everybody keeps telling you about how the economy is doing fantastic. Meanwhile, you're being squeezed in your own life. You can't get a pay raise. There's nothing you can do about it. And everything costs more. Your rent payment, your health care, your children's education. This squeeze is real. And the middle class is feeling it. We ask ourselves, well, why is this happening? This is not just because of a downturn. We had a very serious financial crisis in this country. We had a very severe downturn. But what I've described to you is not just a function of that. Because if this was just a cyclical downturn, it would go up, down, and come back up again. We have had a dramatic change in the very structure of our economy. And our policies have not reacted to that, have not changed with those structural changes that have happened in our economy. And even in this debate about the budget, you see evidence of that. And I didn't come here to be critical of the people who worked on it. I know they worked hard. But our policies do not reflect these structural changes. They're very real. In the 20th century, practically anybody who wanted a job in America could find one. There was plenty of blue-collar jobs for people like my parents, and there seemed to be plenty of white-collar jobs for people like their children. But in the 21st century, many of those jobs are gone. They've been sent overseas, or they've been replaced because of technology or innovation. New jobs are being created, but they require skills that too many of our people still don't have. In the 21st century, in the 20th century, ours was a national economy. Your clients and your competitors were halfway across town, maybe halfway across the country. In the 21st century, we operate in a global economy where your customers, your clients, your investors, your competitors, and your partners are just as likely to be halfway around the world as they are halfway down the street. And that's had a dramatic made a structural change to our economy. And last but not least, everything costs more. In the 20th century, a bartender and a maid, they could afford to own a home, own a car, take a vacation once a year with their kids. If my parents tried to do today what they did in 1956, they couldn't. Those jobs just don't pay enough. And all those things I just described cost so much more money. We have to respond to these structural changes. We have to turn the page on these old ideas and, quite frankly, on the leaders that have those old ideas. We cannot continue to confront 21st century challenges with 21st century strategies. We need new leaders and we need new ideas that respond to these deep structural changes. And for 4 straight years that I've been talking about out here in the Senate, the progress in that regard, unfortunately, has been slow. Now, I didn't come here today to be overly partisan, but I know for this. In 2008, a lot of people thought that our current president would be that kind of new leader. But that's not what we've gotten. They thought he would be that kind of new leader because he talked about being a champion for the middle class. He talked about a modern agenda of hope and change. But that's not what we've gotten. Instead of focusing on working families, he focused on things like the liberal dream of government-run education, government-run health care, He focused on radical environmental policies instead of focusing on the middle class. Instead of modern ideas, what we got was just old-fashioned big government and crony corporatism. Just a startling example of it is how the big insurance companies have gamed Obamacare. Imagine for a moment if you were in a business and the government came in with a law that said, we are going to make people buy the product that you sell. We are going to give them money to buy the product that you sell. And by the way, if you lose money selling this product, we're going to bail you out with taxpayer dollars. And that's what big insurance companies were able to get out of Obamacare. People are required to buy insurance. They get a subsidy to buy that insurance. And if they lose that money, they get a bailout with taxpayer dollars. That's outrageous. And it's not surprising that the stock prices of big insurance companies have doubled since Obamacare passed. And meanwhile, working Americans are paying more, higher deductibles, higher co-payments, higher premiums, and they're getting less coverage. That's an example of corporatism. Despite all this rhetoric that they're fighting on behalf of the middle class, the last few years have been a bonanza for big business, a bonanza for people who can hire the lawyers and the lobbyists to navigate the complexities of government. So it's very simple. If you can hire an army of lawyers and lobbyists in Washington, D.C., you get your priorities and bills like the one that are before us today, or others for that matter. But if you're trying to start a business out of the spare bedroom of your home, if you're a small business person that works 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, just to stay afloat, you can't afford to hire the best law firm in Washington, D.C. to navigate those regulations. And you sure can't afford to hire a lobbying firm to come here and write those regulations to your advantage. In fact, I would go further and say that big government is a competitive advantage for big businesses, because they know that the bigger and more complicated the rules are, the harder it is for someone new to come along and compete with them for that same business. And we've seen that time and again. I saw it during my time as a state official, as the Speaker of the House in Florida, and you see it here as well in Washington, D.C. This is corporatism, and both parties are guilty of it. And that's why it shouldn't surprise us that under the last 6 years of this presidency, 95% of the income gains in this country have gone to the top 1% of earners, and 93% of Americans have seen virtually no income growth in the last 6 years. And yet, we continue to see an effort to push policies from this administration that keeps us on the same course. And here's the course that we're on. Radical environmental groups, they're going to get their way. They're going to get their policies, their executive orders, and their rules written. Meanwhile, people that work at factories, people that are dependent on energy jobs, they get nothing. Public employee unions that are well represented and spend a lot of money influencing government, they get all the rules they want from the NLRB and the government. They get their help. You know who does it? The UPS truckers, the plumbers, the pipe fitters, the electricians, the construction workers. And all these elites that are going around begging for more government spending, they're going to get their way in this bill from this administration. And middle-class Americans that are working as hard as they ever had, they get stuck with the tax bill to pay for it. We can't keep doing this. If we keep doing this, we are going to lose the American dream. We are going to lose what makes us different. We're going to lose what makes us special. But I believe, with all my heart, that if we can turn the page on these policies, not only can we save the American dream, but we can have another American century. To do that, I think there are three key things we have to do, and I wish more of this was reflected in the bill before us. The first thing we need better jobs. Jobs that don't just pay more, and that's important, but jobs that provide enough flexibility as well, so that you do have time if you need to take time off to go take your kids to a field trip or a doctor's appointment. You know how many Americans out there can't take their kids to a dental appointment because that requires them to take 2 hours off of work? You know how many Americans out there don't have the flexibility to be able to watch their son or their daughter at the Christmas pageant this year in school because their job doesn't have flexibility? These better jobs that I'm talking about are jobs that pay more, but also provide the flexibility so you have the time to be a better spouse, a better member of your community, and a better parent. And jobs that won't disappear, by the way, with the next advancement in technology. Jobs that give you an opportunity for promotion and upward mobility. These are the kinds of jobs we need. And in order to have those jobs in America in the 21st century, we need to become globally competitive. We are engaged in a global competition with the rest of the world for these jobs. It is the economic Olympics every single day. And we can win that competition. We can win it if we had a tax code that no longer made America one of the most expensive places in the world to create those jobs. We could win it if we reformed our regulatory code so that we are no longer such a burdensome place to create those jobs. We could win it if we got our national debt under control, which scares people from investing in creating those jobs here because they believe we're headed for a debt crisis in the future. We can win that competition if we fully utilized our energy resources in a safe and responsible way. You've already seen the benefits of American energy exploration, the jobs it creates, not just in energy, but in manufacturing. You've already seen the benefits of American energy production in the falling price of gasoline at the pump. And that has real-world implications. Being from Florida, we expect that many more people are going to take the drive to Disney World this winter because getting there is a lot cheaper than it was a year ago. Ticket price is another matter. But getting there a lot cheaper than it was before. These have real implications. The other thing, we can win that competition, but we have to keep our edge on innovation. We are the world's greatest innovators. We can't lose that edge. And by the way, winning that global competition requires us to be globally engaged. We must remain involved in global affairs. Strong American leadership on this planet is what allows the world, is a factor in allowing the world to have the prosperity and the stability it needs for a rising global middle class. People that can afford to buy the things we sell, the products we offer, the services we offer. We will benefit from that. But creating more of those better jobs is not enough. The second thing we have to do is we have to make sure people have the skills for those new jobs. Because these new jobs of the 21st century are going to require a higher level of skill than ever before. And the problem is we have an archaic 20th century education model. We tell kids in high school that the only way you will ever be successful is you all have to get a 4-year degree, and there is nothing wrong with getting a 4-year degree. But it is wrong to tell children and students in this country that that is the only way to get ahead, when we know that in the 21st century there are going to be millions of middle skill, quality paying jobs that require more than high school but less than 4 years of college. We have a system that does nothing, absolutely nothing about that. We don't offer nearly enough vocational programs in high school. Why have we stigmatized jobs that when you work with your hands, when we know that we need airplane mechanics, and we need electricians, and we need plumbers and pipe fitters, and we need high-tech welders and people that know how to do 21st century welding and machinists for 21st century factories and manufacturing. And we can teach people these skills while they're still in high school so they can graduate ready to go to work. We also need more apprenticeship programs, and that's something we can partner with labor unions on so that we can train and retrain Americans in these higher skilled jobs. We also need to help people out there that have to work full-time. Imagine for a moment a single mother raising 2 kids on her own, and she's a receptionist at a law firm. She's never going to get a significant raise working as a receptionist. The only way she's ever going to get ahead is if she can become a paralegal. But to become a paralegal, she has to go to school. How is she going to go to school under this current system? She wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning and makes kids breakfast, drops them off at school, drives to work, works 8 or 9 hours, rushes to the daycare center or the after-school program before it closes, picks them up and brings them home. She's already tired, but she's not done. She's got to make them dinner and make sure they finish their homework. By 11 o'clock, she hits that bed. She is exhausted. When is she going to go to school? At 4 in the morning? We need to have an education system that's flexible enough so that she can acquire the skills to become a paralegal while she works full-time and raises that family. Allowing her to package learning from online courses and work experience. If you're a receptionist at a law firm, and you've worked there for 8 or 9 years, there are some skills you've picked up working there that should count for credit hours, instead of forcing you to sit through a 2-year program so the college you're going to can make the money off of you. We need to create programs that people like her can acquire the skills they need for those 21st century jobs. We also need to, by the way, create alternatives to traditional college. It doesn't matter where you acquire the learning. You should be able to package all of your learning. And so take, for example, someone who's worked 10 years, served in the military, has extensive experience volunteering, has taken a number of courses at a community college, and wants to get a degree in something. We should be able to package all of that lifelong learning, all of those sources of learning, into the equivalent of a degree program. You know how many Americans out there are sitting on 30 or 40 credit hours from a community college? But having 30 hours of college credit is the same as having 0, because you don't get any degree certificate for it. And so the private sector looks at you and says, well, we're glad you went to class, but where's your degree or your associate's degree? I wish we had a more concerted effort in helping people that are halfway there to get all the way there by using things like online coursework and giving them credit for life and work experience. We need to think outside the box on these issues, because if we don't empower people with these skills, they won't be able to take advantage of the opportunities of the 21st century. This is what a 21st century educational system looks like. I would just make one more point when we talk about schools. The most important school a child will ever attend is their home. We cannot ignore the fact that the breakdown of American families is having a dramatic impact on our economy and on the quality of life of our people. Now, there's a reality here about this. A growing number of children are born into single-parent homes or are born into broken families. And we have to help them because we know that statistically speaking, children being raised in broken families and in single-parent homes with low incomes are going to struggle to succeed. They will not have an equal opportunity unless someone does something to help them out. And we can help. We can help by helping their parents acquire the skills they need for these better jobs, like that single mother I just talked about, but also by giving their parents the opportunity to send them to a school of their choice. It is immoral. It is un-American that the only people in this country that cannot choose where their children go to school are poor people. It's outrageous. Rich people can send their kids to any school they want, and that's their right. Middle class, they'll move to a better neighborhood, or they'll struggle to put just enough money together to put their kids in a better school. But if you are poor, and the school in your neighborhood is a dangerous school that you're not learning in, there is nothing you can do. That is outrageous. The answer to that is, well, improve that school. I agree. But in the 5 years that it takes to improve that school, that child has gone from first grade to sixth grade, and you're never getting those years back. So those parents, every parent in America, especially low-income parents, deserve the opportunity to put their children in a school of their choice. There are other ways we can help families. Primarily, that's the responsibility of us as individuals and our communities. But we should have a pro-marriage tax code, pro-marriage government program. We shouldn't have marriage penalties. We shouldn't tell people that if you get married, your taxes are going to go up, or if you get married, you're going to lose Medicaid. We have to get rid of those things. We have to remove those marriage penalties in our tax code and in our programs. And by the way, we should also protect our faith communities. They are an important part of instilling values, because you can have all the diplomas on the wall you want. If you don't have the values of hard work and discipline and self-control and respect for others and respect for the dignity of life of all people, you're going to struggle to succeed. And no one is born with those values. Those values have to be taught to you by strong families and a strong home, and they have to be reinforced by strong communities. And one of the pillars of strong communities is our faith community, whatever faith you choose. And that's why protecting religious liberties is so important. Last but not least, restoring the American dream isn't just about better jobs and better training and better skills. It's also about dealing with the cost of living. And that's why I think in the coming year, we desperately need a pro-family tax code. Instead of all these loopholes that are designed to help big business or the cronies of the people that serve here in Washington, we need a pro-family tax code. For example, let's increase the child tax credit, because it costs money to raise children in the 21st century. And these working families are struggling to provide for their children. Let's have a pro-family tax code like the one Senator Lee from Utah and I have proposed. Let's increase the child tax credit. We also have to deal with the cost of higher education. It's completely out of control. And you know who's getting destroyed by that? The middle class. I have the honor of teaching a course at Florida International University. Many working class students there. And here's their frustration, and they're right. Their parents make too much money for financial aid, but they don't make enough money to be able to afford the school. So you know what they do? They take out loans in the tens of thousands of dollars. And I know about this firsthand, because when I swore into the Senate here 4 years ago, I owed over $100,000 in student loans. My parents could never afford to pay for my school. Now, I was blessed to be able to receive Pell Grants and other assistance, but I still had to use loans. When we first got married, it was the single largest expenditure. And I used to joke to my wife, you didn't just get married to me, you got married to Sally Mae. Because every month, Sally Mae came up with a $1,400, $1,300 bill. And there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of young people across America that are stuck with big loan debt and degrees that don't lead to jobs. I hope we'll tackle that this year, and there are a couple of proposals that I think will help. The first is we should make income-based repayment the repayment method for everyone, unless you opt out of it. Second, I think that people deserve the right to know before they take out a loan how much they can expect to make. Before you take out a loan to pay the tuition of a school, that school should be required to tell you, this is how much people who graduate from our school make when they graduate from this degree. So you can decide whether it's worth borrowing $100,000 to be a Greek philosophy major, because the market for Greek philosophers is very tight these days. And last but not least, I think we need alternatives to traditional student loans. One of the things I proposed is something called the Student Investment Plan, which allows people to invest in your future. Basically, a venture fund in you. Someone will come forward and say, we will give you the money to go to college. In exchange, you will pay us back 1%, 2% of your income for your first 10 years. They are investing in you. It's a student investment plan. It's not for everyone. It's not a panacea, but it is an alternative to student loans. One of the things that will help, by the way, to be an alternative to student loans is what I mentioned earlier. If you were able to package learning and turn self-directed learning into the equivalent of a degree. There are other big items of cost of living. Healthcare, I don't need to tell you about. How many people out there today, particularly in the middle class, are starting to find out, I have a higher deductible, I have higher co-payments, I have higher premiums, and I'm getting less coverage than I used to. This is not a myth, this is not a rumor, this is happening to millions of people. We get the calls, and so do you in your office about all these things. One last point on the cost of living is dealing with poverty. Our anti-poverty programs don't work. There are anti-poverty programs in this Omnibus, a term, by the way, none of us have ever used before. I don't know who makes these things up, but anyway, there's anti-poverty programs in this bill. Our anti-poverty programs, they alleviate poverty. They don't cure it. Imagine if you broke your arm and you went to the hospital and they said, here's a lifetime supply of painkillers. I'm not saying you shouldn't help people with the pain of a broken arm, but you've got to fix that broken arm. Our programs don't fix poverty. They don't cure poverty. We need programs that will cure poverty. And that's why I believe we need what's called the Flex Fund, where we take all of our existing anti-poverty dollars. I'm not saying cut it. I'm saying take our existing anti-poverty dollars and put them in a Flex Fund and allow states and local communities to design specific plans that work in their communities. I can tell you, just in the state of Florida, urban poverty and rural poverty have different elements to them. And a program that might work very well in the inner city of Miami doesn't work at all with the rural poverty in South Dade. We should allow states and local communities to design programs that help cure poverty. And the ultimate cure for poverty is a good job, which means everyone who's on these assistance programs should either be in school, acquiring the skills they need for a better job, or should be working, improving their skills through experience. And let me just say this about that, and I've talked about one of the aspects of the reforms that we want, a wage enhancement. If the only job you can find pays you $8 or $9 an hour, but you need $15 an hour to provide for yourself, I would rather come in with government money and make up the difference through a wage enhancement than give you $9 or $10 an hour, or the equivalent to $7 or $8 an hour, in a welfare check. Because while you're working, you're gaining experience. And we're also helping supplement your paycheck so you can pay your bills. That isn't forever. That can't become a way of life. But I'm telling you, if you've been unemployed for 5 or 6 years and you all show up somewhere to get a job and they ask you, what have you been doing for the last 6 years? And you say, I haven't been doing anything, your chances of getting that job have just diminished dramatically. It is not good for people to be unemployed long-term in terms of their long-term job prospects. That's why I've talked about a wage enhancement program as well. I think if we do all these things that I've talked about, make ourselves a globally competitive economy so the jobs are created here, give our people 21st century skills, help people deal with the cost of living, I think we have every reason in the world to be optimistic about our future. You know, I'll close by saying that I think sometimes we get confused here about how we measure the greatness of our country or the progress that we're making. We look to facts and figures like the unemployment rate. We look at things like the GDP of the country. These are important figures. We shouldn't ignore them. Let me tell you how I measure the progress of this country. I mentioned earlier my father was a bartender. At many events throughout the years that I've been involved in public service, I'll go give a speech somewhere and there's a bartender standing behind a bar in the back of the room. Almost every time I see that, it reminds me of my father, who stood for so many years behind a bar. He was happy for the work he had, but that's not the life he wanted for us. He wanted something more for us. He stood behind that bar all those years, So one day I could have the chance to stand here on the floor of the United States Senate and talk about things like the American dream. That journey from behind that bar to where I'm standing here tonight, that is the American dream. That is the American dream. A few years ago, someone who had heard me give that speech, I was in New York City, and after I was done speaking, employees there came up to me, and they handed me this name tag. It said, Rubio, banquet bartender. It was one of the most touching gifts I ever got from anyone. But it was also a reminder that whether or not we remain a special nation will be determined by whether or not people today can do what my parents did, by whether or not people today can still make that journey that my father made, from behind that bar to where I stand today. Can the single mother provide her children the life she always wanted but never had? Can that worker at that hotel open doors for their children that were closed for him? That's how we'll know if we're still special. If they can, then this new century is also going to be American century. We do have real challenges, but we also have real opportunities. And there is no time in history that I would rather be than right here, right now. I believe technology will allow us to collaborate and reach more people than ever before. I believe innovation will solve problems we once thought were insurmountable. I believe a rising global middle class will provide more prosperity to more people everywhere than we have ever seen. That's what I believe the 21st century can be about. I believe that you and I live on the eve of another American century. All we have to do now is reach for it and grab it. All we have to do now is do what our parents did for us, whatever it took to leave for their children a better life and a better future. And if we do that, then we will leave behind for our children what every generation of American before us has left behind: the single greatest nation in the history of all mankind.